Hey everybody, in today's episode, it's myself, Nicole, and Dr. Labor. Dr. Labor, she's an expert when it comes to addiction. She specializes in addiction medicine, and she's in recovery herself. She talks in detail how she ended up in recovery, how she was using drugs in medical school, and ultimately how she is impacting people now that struggle with addiction in a very positive way. She's based out of Ohio, super knowledgeable when it comes to addiction, and we really get into detail about the brain chemistry and why it is so difficult for an addict to just stop and nearly impossible. So if you're somebody that wonders why a drug addict or an alcoholic can't just stop, this is going to be a great episode for you to listen to. But before we get into it, do want to talk about today's sponsor, which is SoberLink. We talk about having tools in our toolbox when it comes to staying sober. SoberLink is something that you would want to add. What is SoberLink? Portable breathalyzer device. It's got facial recognition, so it's got to be you doing the breathalyzer. You can schedule out your test times, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever works best for your schedule. It's tamper-proof. You can't mess with this thing. And you can have your results sent to an accountability partner, maybe a trusted therapist, a trusted family member. It is designed to be accountability for you. That is it. It doesn't take the place of addiction treatment or Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever 12-step program that you choose to use. It's just there for added accountability. That's it. Now, SoberLink is gracious enough to give you 50% off of your first device. All you have to do is go to soberlink.com/RRT. Again, it's soberlink.com/RRT. Receive 50% off of your first device. Definitely go check it out. All right? Enjoy the show. If you have an addict or an alcoholic in your life, chances are you're angry, frustrated, worried, scared, a lot of emotions. We totally understand. We've worked with a lot of families going through the same thing that you're going through right now. You want them to get help. You would love for them to not have this addiction, but you don't know what to do. This is why we put together Family Reconnect. This is a program that is designed to put you first. Ultimately, if you help yourself, you can help them. In this, we're going to teach you how to set appropriate boundaries. We're going to teach you how to communicate effectively. We're going to teach you how to go into situations with your addict loved one that is going to be effective. A lot of times, family members and loved ones, they act out of emotion. We get that. We understand. But all that does is make it worse. You need people to come alongside you that can walk this journey with you. So starting on June 3rd, we are going live. We want you to be a part of this community. Because remember, you didn't cause this. You can't cure it, and you definitely can't control it. So June 3rd is when we're going live. You can find all the information at realrecoverytalk.com/FRC. Again, it's realrecoverytalk.com/FRC. We're excited to go on this journey with you, and we'll see you on June 3rd. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I'm your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Nicole.
Hello.
And we also have Nicole.
Hi, Tom.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use, and thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. Right, ladies?
That's right.
Sure.
Hello, Dr. Nicole Labor. Is it labor or labor?
Don't make it fancy. It's labor.
Labor. Got it. All right. Okay, so full transparency. Nicole, I'm going back, Nicole Montgomery,
Yes.
Nicole, sends me a Instagram thing, I don't know, 2 months ago. And she's like, oh my gosh, you need to watch this. And as in full transparency, I didn't watch it. Okay. Because I don't watch many things that people send me on Instagram. But I trust Nicole, and I trust when she says, look, we got to really try and get this person on the podcast. She has a great message. And so that's why we're here. I said to my Nicole, make it happen. If you can make the connection, let's make it work. And so here we are. So Nicole, my Nicole. So here's how this is going to work. When I say Nicole, I'm referring to my Nicole. When I say Dr. Labor, I'm referring to Dr. Labor. Okay?
That makes it easier. Yeah.
Makes it easy. Nicole, give us a brief kind of what intrigued you about having Dr. Labor on the show, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So I was doing group therapy one night, and we have a client here now currently, which I'll say his first name because I'm sure he'll be happy about it. His first name is George. And he was like, you need to watch this video that we were shown at the treatment center previously. And I said, okay, send it over. And I watched it, and I was just telling Tom and Dr. Labor how, I love the neuroscience of addiction, and breaking down the disease in the brain helps people that don't understand addiction understand what's going on. And this was probably the best way I've ever heard anybody explain it in the way that anybody could understand it. And I probably watched it like 3 times. And then I ended up doing a group around it. So I shared it in my group, and like we would pause it, talk about it. And like all the clients were like, "Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Like that's me." And it just gave them a sense of validation and even understanding as to some of their behaviors. So after that, sent it to everybody I worked with, and I'm like, "You guys have to watch this," and the way that she breaks this down. And, Eric, obviously, he does, like, um, a lot of the podcasts with Tom and does the big book study, and he loved it. So me and him were going back and forth, and he was able to kinda use the information and link it with what Bill W. wrote in the big book and how it's the scientific evidence that's backing up what they did, and we just went into this full on, like, nerd texting moment, and anyway, it just became this whole thing. And so I was like, "You know what? Let me just see if maybe I can reach out to her." And I talked to you, Tom, and I started, like, going on Instagram and stuff, and I ended up finding Dr. Labor, and she was so just willing to talk to me and, like, come on here. So I'm just really excited to have you on here. I've been talking about this video ever since, and the information and the way that you break it down. It's just something I think the world needs to see, especially if most people have at least one person in their life that's touched by addiction. So I just thought it was really powerful the way she explained it.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Labor. Let me give you a situation, and I know you're familiar with this situation. The person that comes to you, or a loved one, maybe it's a wife or a husband or a child, or they have a child and they say, I don't understand. They can see everything that they're doing in their life. Why can't they just stop? What is the issue? Like they've destroyed everything in their whole entire life, their relationships, they're now unemployed. I'm ready to leave with the kids. I don't understand why they just can't stop. Before you answer that, I guess take a few minutes and share with the audience how you even got into this, because you are a medical doctor, you do specialize in addiction medicine, and so the credentials are there for what they're worth, but you have an experience and you have a history with this. So walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So, I don't, at the risk of like giving an entire mini lead, essentially, from the very moment I used any substance, it was problematic for me, right? Starting with alcohol, progressing to marijuana, and then ultimately to pain pills and heroin. And so I was using opiates and heroin all the way up through college. Well, starting in college up through medical school, and was in the third year of medical school when I could not maintain anymore because really nobody can. Um, and so I wound up having like going into treatment and getting clean. And then I was able to go back and finish medical school. And then when the question came up, like, well, what do you want to do? What kind of doctor are you going to be? It was like, oh, well, I'll do addiction medicine because number one, my personality is just not. I'd either have to be like a surgeon where I could be a dick and nobody cares because I'm good at what I'm doing, um, or addiction where like honesty, rigorous honesty, authenticity, all of that is going to be, if not valued, at least accepted. So it was a good field for me. So I went through family medicine and residency and got board certified in family medicine and then on to addiction medicine. And I actually did my fellowship in addiction medicine at the treatment center where I went for treatment like 5 years previously. So there was a little bit of a full circle moment for me there. Um, and then, yeah, I've been practicing ever since. And when I finished my fellowship in addiction and I was looking for a job, this was like, I don't want to date myself, but like 15 years ago, there weren't very many addiction medicine specialists in the country. So all of these places were like just starting to like want to create addiction medicine programs. So they were looking for a director, and as much as my ego was like, oh yeah, I could totally be the medical director of a 700,000 patient healthcare system. I just was not qualified for that. So when I interviewed here in Akron, it was really just going to be like a practice interview, like, oh, it's a free meal or whatever. But when I realized that the position was actually at St. Thomas Hospital in Ignatia Hall, essentially following in Dr. Bob's and Sister Ignatia's footsteps, I was like, well, what better place to start your career in addiction medicine? So I wound up actually taking that job and now I'm fucking stuck in Ohio. Um but yeah, that's kind of how it started for me. And then again, because not many people do what I do, I'm working for the health system, the hospital system that hired me, but then they're kind of like subcontracting me out to all of these local agencies that have no medical director, um, because it's such a hard position to fill. So, and then as time went on, like I would shift around like my contracts with different places. And so like that's why I wound up being the medical director at like 4 different places because nobody else would do it, I guess. And yeah, and so, I think everybody has a little bit of a superpower, right? Everybody's kind of good at something. And I am not, the smartest person. I'm not the smartest doctor. I'm not, particularly skilled at a lot of things, but it was discovered early on in my career that one thing I am good at is taking complicated ideas and uncomplicating them for the average person. Probably partly because I need to do that for me. I need to sort of unwind it for myself, but to be able to present it to people in a way that's palatable and understandable. So that's what I started doing. I started doing a lot of talks and then that like steamrolled and I was just asked to speak everywhere and I was doing all of these speaking engagements and I was getting tired and pulled away from my family. So I wrote the book, The Addictaholic Deconstructed, which is basically that talk. And it's just kind of been like I tell patients all the time come into one of my facilities and they'll say, oh, I saw your video. And I'm like, yeah, you can't really be an addict in Northeast Ohio and not wind up coming across me in some way. Like I'm like the plague. I'm everywhere in addiction.
That's awesome. I mean, you obviously have impacted a lot of people in a positive way. The book you said it's Addictaholic Deconstructed, and I'm assuming that can be found on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, Walmart.com, probably Barnes and Noble. I mean, I think anywhere books are sold, you could probably get it.
Okay, so I'll link it in the show notes for anybody that's interested. So going back to, well, Nicole, do you have anything before we move on?
Well, I wanted to say, like, that skill that you said that you noticed about being able to deconstruct really complicated concepts, I mean, it was very apparent even to me when I watched the video. You really have such a skill for that because the neuroscience can be very complicated, and you mentioned this also, which is true, that even scientists that study the brain, some don't even fully understand the brain, so for you to be able to have a way, a niche, if you will, of, like, being able to deconstruct some of these things, I mean, it's impacted people here that you've never met, you know? And it's just a like, I love that you, like, as a human being, like, you tapped into something that you found you were good at because hell, like, look how many people you're impacting that you don't even know, you know? So, I wanted to ask you one thing before we keep going. Could you say hi to George for me? He would love that. He
Hi,
was like,
George.
"Yeah." He was the one
Hello,
that showed me the
George.
video.
Um, all right. So going back to my question, obviously it was, why can't they just stop? But going to what you were saying, taking a complicated issue and uncomplicating it and deconstructing it, what is it that you think, from a family member's perspective, why they tend to overcomplicate this when, realistically it doesn't need to be that complicated? Like, walk us through that process for yourself and how you kind of walk people through this.
Through what is actually happening in the brain when people are behaving badly?
Yeah, like if I'm a parent, let's just role play for a second. I come to you and I say, Dr. Labor, you know, my wife, she is a raging alcoholic. I just recently, well, not recently, probably 9 months ago, I don't know, she somehow got a hold of opiates. Now she's taken opiates, but the alcohol has been something that she's been doing for the last 20 years. We met when we were 20 years old. We're now 40, and this is not a true story, by the way. So any of the listeners, do not assume I'm talking about my wife. Um, but she's just, she's drinking. She doesn't necessarily wake up in the morning and drink, but as soon as I leave for work and, she's by herself, I find her, drinking, and I get home and she's pretty shit faced, but I'm ready to leave her. The kids are done with her. They don't know where their mom, who she's turned into. Why can't she just stop? Like, but you obviously know well in this space. I mean, am I just overthinking this, or is there more to this? I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. So this is it seems very illogical, right? But because logic comes from a place in your brain, the frontal cortex, that's where our logic comes from. Part of that is broken in someone who has the disease of addiction, and part of their midbrain is broken, right? So essentially, what happens is the brain responds, and again, you have to have like a genetic predisposition for it, right? So but your brain responds to highly rewarding chemicals in the reward center of the brain by taking away receptors for highly rewarding chemical, right? So dopamine's our pleasure chemical. When you use cocaine, heroin, benzodiazepines, marijuana, alcohol, any rewarding, you release a ton of dopamine into your midbrain, right, which is where your reward center is. Okay, everyone, that's biological fact. Every single person that uses any kind of highly rewarding substance will release a ton of dopamine into that area. So when you do that, when you repeatedly expose that area to highly rewarding substances, your brain will respond by taking away those receptors. So let's think about it like it's a baseball field, and you have a baseball field and there's 100 players on that field, okay, with their mitts up in the air ready to catch a ball. And those players are your dopamine receptors. Okay. When you do something like you win the lottery, or you get married, or you do something that you enjoy, you release, let's just say for simplicity's sake, 10 to 20 balls, molecules of dopamine into that baseball field. Okay. you have to catch at least 10 balls for your brain to register something as enjoyable, right? So you have to get at least the 10 molecules of dopamine for your brain to say, yes, I like this. So for example, when I play a musical instrument, which I'm terrible at and I don't enjoy, I probably dump 3 to 5 balls into my ball field. So my brain goes, I don't like that. I could care less, right? But when I do something that I do enjoy, like roller skating or something, petting a dog, okay, I release like maybe 15 or 20 balls into my field. When we use highly rewarding substances, the reason that they are highly rewarding is because they release an unnatural amount of dopamine into that area. So you dump 200 balls in that field when you use like heroin, for example. So when you dump 200 balls into a ball field and there's 100 players there, they're all probably going to catch a ball, right? So your brain starts to go, this is not very efficient. And the manager comes out on the field and says, okay, I'm not going to continue to pay the salaries on 100 players if we're going to all be catching balls all the time. I don't need it. I only need 10 of you to be catching balls. So he pulls all the players off the field, except maybe 10 that are now few and far between, scattered. Okay. So you're left with 10 players on the field. They're few and far between. So now when you dump, say, 20 balls into that field, chances are the 10 players are not going to catch the balls before they get sucked back out of the field, right? Because they're all over the place. So the thing that was previously enjoyable is no longer enjoyable, right? So the only thing that my brain enjoys is getting 100 or 200 molecules of dopamine. And the only way to do that is to continue to use some kind of highly rewarding substance, right? So, and this also lends itself to this idea that, like, even though you don't necessarily like cocaine or methamphetamine, if that's all of that's available, the brain will take it because it's going to release some dopamine, right? So to start with, this part of the brain is broken and it needs more than a normal amount of highly rewarding substance just to feel sort of normal, to get some pleasure, right? Because we need pleasure to live. You would never get out of bed in the morning if you didn't enjoy anything, right? So that's part one. You have this broken reward center, needs highly rewarding substances to feel normal, okay? Part two is that you have a frontal cortex. That's the part of your brain that makes you you. That's where your consciousness is. That's where your experiences are, and that's where your skills are linked. Okay. So when you start to use, or when you start a skill, to practice a skill, you basically build a road through your brain to get from A to B, right? I am at A and I want to achieve B. So I have to practice this skill to get from A to B. So I pick up a guitar, I practice, I build a footpath. I keep practicing. Now it's a wider road. Keep practicing. It's a 2-lane road. And by the time it's a 16-lane highway with traffic in both directions, I'm ready to play at Carnegie Hall, right? That's how we build our skill sets. We build these roads through our frontal cortex. Well, when I find that when I pick up a drink or a drug, I get to change the way I feel very quickly. So when I am stressed, when I am excited, even, and I want to celebrate, when I am angry, sad, whatever, I use a substance and I instantly change from feeling a way that makes me uncomfortable to feeling better. So my brain, again, in a state of efficiency, starts to build a road that says using highly rewarding substances is my skill to get from A to B. It is my coping skill. And I continue to use substances, and that becomes wider and wider. And now I have a 16-lane road that gets me from feeling A to feeling B. That is my coping highway. And it is consistent of highly rewarding substances. Now, some of those substances are like the Maserati, right? Like that's going to be heroin for me or methamphetamine for somebody. Alcohol's like maybe like a Schwinn bike, and marijuana maybe like a little moped or something, right? It's still going to get you from A to B, and it's still taking the same road. It just may take a little longer for you to get there. But But ultimately, that road is open to any of those substances. And then the on-ramps to that highway, right, are things like instant gratification, the need to take something to fix a problem, right? Because when we take a substance, we instantly feel better. And so we start to believe that the instantaneous nature of that is part of the coping skill, right? So the only way for us to really develop a new coping skill would be to shut down that highway. Right? So we have to hang police tape, but that means we can't let anybody on that road. You can't be using that road at all because there's no way that your brain is going to want to take some fucking little ass footpath consisting of journaling, right? To get from A to B when it has
Mhm.
a highway available to it. Okay. So when people say like, why can't my family member just stop? The answer is because number one, they have no coping skill for life. They don't know how to manage life without. Number two, they have no ability to experience joy, pleasure, or normalcy without a highly rewarding substance, right? So this is similar. This is the similar process to what, and then I say this in the Addiction 101 lecture. This is the only example I really have that makes sense for people. If I am in the desert, and you are in the desert and you are on day 5 without water and you're literally dying of thirst. Your organs are shutting down. You are not going to live 24 more hours. And I come up to you with a bottle of water and I give it to you, but I say, if you drink this water, I'm going to take your kids and your house and your bank account and your job and all these things you value. You're going to drink the water. Everybody on earth is going to drink the water because in those moments, it is that midbrain, that reward center that is awake and going, we have to solve this problem. And the frontal cortex, where all those skills are and where you value things, is shut down. So
Mhm.
you're going to drink the water and then you're going to satiate that survival need. And then you're going to say, I now have to manipulate this person into giving me my stuff back because that was a terrible decision. Why did I do that? Until you're dying of thirst again. So it's essentially a two-part brain problem that prevents the person from just being able to stop. They don't have a skill set for it because their brain has been rewired. And so they need to unwire it or rewire it a different way in order to be able to stop.
And that when you use that example, I applied that with the clients how the desperation and the shame they feel when they come to treatment, because now they're feeling all of that, and then, what was it that I was gonna say? When they start to feel, like, "You know what? I can't believe I made those decisions. I can't believe I'm here again. I can't believe that I did that. I robbed my grandmother's, like, whatever, 100-year-old coin for drugs." Because in that moment, they were in their midbrain, they were in fight or flight at that point, it was about survival, and then that front part kicks in, and then they feel like shit. And that's almost like you see that every day when people come into treatment. Um, Go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
well, and I think that's why, I mean, people really struggle because their value systems are fully intact. They know
Right.
what's important to them, they know right from wrong, but that shuts down and that midbrain and reward center kicks in and takes over and says, no, no, this is a survival issue. And so they behave in a way that contradicts their own value system. And when
Yeah,
we do that, when we contradict our own value system, we create a state of shame, right?
absolutely.
And shame is trauma. It's self-trauma. And so
Oof,
as
yeah.
we self-traumatize, we further exacerbate the problem. And now they have no management skills for the shame and trauma. And so except to use. So they go out and use, and now they're using over their using. And it's just becomes a big vicious cycle.
100%. Oh my gosh, and there's a person I'm thinking of right now in particular where addiction, but they also have a severe trauma history during development. And so that also, from the research I've done, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it severely impacts the development of the front part of the brain because of the cortisol and the fight or flight that gets released during trauma in early childhood where they're in survival. And so it slows down the frontal cortex as far as developing healthy coping skills because no one's teaching them. They're learning how to just survive in whatever trauma experience that they're having. So not only is the front part of the brain not being developed as it should, then you got addiction, which they found as a solution to some of those issues. Now they're in treatment, and any little thing puts them into a triggering moment, and, like, I have to speak to this person pretty regularly because they wanna leave all the time, and they're having really high cravings because they're still developing coping skills. They've never learned them.
Well, and we see that all the time. Like the people that are able to get well from addiction the quickest and easiest are the ones that develop the addiction later in life. And that's because they already have some roads built for
Right.
coping. But the ones that started when they were very young don't have any roads built, right? And you know, the way trauma works is too is like when you experience trauma and you release all of that corticotropin releasing factor, your brain responds the same way. It pulls players off your reward center baseball field. So you have fewer dopamine receptors to begin with, which
Right.
means that those people actually need higher levels of dopamine than normal people, or non-traumatized people just to feel normal. And so the first time they get exposed to some sort of chemical, they're like, "Oh shit, that's where it's at." Like that they feel normal. It's not that they got high, it's that they felt like okay. And so then part of the communication system with this whole process is, to lay down that road of coping or any skill, there's a feedback mechanism to the reward center. And it says, this skill is working, which then dumps some dopamine, which then
Mhm.
prompts you to enjoy that process, which then so you continue to lay down that road. So if you're traumatized and you use and you already are trying to build a road by using external sources to manage your, emotional state, then your coping skill highway is already fucked up, right?
100%, yeah.
And then, yeah, you start using substances, feel normal, and now you perpetuate the problem. But now you have to lie, cheat, and steal to get your substances, which violates your core value system, which causes guilt and shame, which further traumatizes you, which makes you want to use because you have no skill to deal with trauma. And it
Right.
just becomes that vicious cycle. But that's also why I always tell people early on in recovery, like therapy is very, very important and it's a necessary part of the treatment, but don't be trying to deal with your trauma like right away because
Mhm.
you don't have the skills to deal with it. And if you're
100%.
if you're trying to deal with that early on, you're just going to use because that's your solution.
Right,
So
like, even this person I'm thinking of, like, I won't even touch that with a 10-foot pole at this point because he doesn't have resources right now, and if you open that up and they don't have resources or coping skills, like you said, they're just gonna go back to what they know and their brain knows was is going to help them regulate their emotions. Um, and so a lot of and I've talked to them about it, like, "You know what? I right now, my main goal is to help increase and heal the frontal cortex by you learning to apply coping skills that are healthy so that you can regulate and tolerate your emotions because right now his tolerance is very, very low when it comes to anything that he perceives through his lens of based on trauma. So it triggers him very easily. And I've heard, clients come in and they're like, "Oh yeah, they did EMDR with me in detox." And I'm like, it makes me cringe. And that it's just such bad practice.
it doesn't even make
It
sense.
makes no sense. It
That's
makes
bizarre.
Yeah, it's fucking bad is what it is.
So I want to get to the the recovery side of it. Dr. Labor, you obviously, work in the treatment space. What is it that you find like if let's just say I come to you and I'm ready. I'll do whatever I have to do. I have no ties to anything. I got fired from my job. I'm fortunate enough to have some resources. If I need to go to treatment, great. If you don't think I need to go to treatment, okay. I'm whatever your wish list is for me. I'm ready. I want to do it. I'm done. what would you prescribe me? Where to start? Like, what are some steps that I can start taking?
So, I mean, I think there always needs to be some sort of assessment, right? To figure out truly where you are in terms of your addiction, your resources, and your coping skills. So I need to know what level that is anyway before I would make a recommendation. I always recommend the least intensive level of treatment that could net results given the person and the circumstances, and then go up from there. So I would put somebody, say, in like an intensive outpatient group therapy program. And then if they're struggling with that, then move them up to a partial hospitalization and then residential and so forth. But I always tell everybody, like, so, I mean, when you treat high blood pressure, right, it's because you have high blood pressure because your vessels are tight and they have a pressure on they're putting pressure on your bloodstream. So we relax the blood vessels to change the blood pressure. We do the opposite. We try to make the body do the opposite of what is broken. So the same is true for addiction, right? Addiction is a disease of isolation. And so we try to steer people towards networking and connection. And so that can happen from day one. So even if we sit down and we do an assessment and we say, hey, I think you need to do residential treatment or you need to do IOP or whatever, that's not going to start instantaneously. That may be a few days or a week away. But in the meantime, you can find some sort of self-help connection group. Now, I did the 12-step groups. I still go to 12-step meetings. Like, I'm a proponent of the 12 steps for my own recovery. I think that's the easiest way because it's readily available. They're everywhere. You can find at least an AA meeting somewhere at any time. But I also don't want people to feel like that's the only option they have. There are other self-help support groups. Now, I won't let people use the fact that they're like, they pick some very like obscure, hey, I went online and I heard about this weird group and, they do blah, blah, blah. And I want to do that. That's the kind of recovery I want. Great. That's fine. When do they meet? Well, they don't meet in this area and they only meet twice a year. Like, no, I'm not. Nope. Find something that actually meets like today.
Yeah,
Right. So, um, but yeah, so like whatever, but getting connected with people right out of the gate is probably the most important thing because it's going to get harder to do that at the further along in treatment you go. It's very easy to get close with your IOP group or your residential group or the people that you're in treatment with, but the statistics are that 1 out of 10 is going to survive that. Like 9 of those people are going to relapse. So that cannot be your only support system. So you need to get out and find some people with long-term recovery. And I also say, like, because I got a lot of patients that come in and they're like, yeah, well, my family doesn't use, they're sober. They've never used, it's never been a problem, and they're really supportive. And I'm like, that's great. And if that were enough, you wouldn't be here in the first place. So
Absolutely.
ultimately, that's very great. I'm happy for you, and you can certainly utilize them to some extent, but that is not enough to keep you clean. Like, you need other people in recovery.
And because it's the opposite for like, and one of our therapists, Maya, she's in recovery as well. She just celebrated 9 years, and she's a dear friend of mine. And she talks a lot about how addiction is the opposite of connection. And there's something powerful about being in a group or meeting people that have gone through similar experiences and be able to not have anything that's limited in as far as sharing that. Like, as far as the families, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of our stuff comes from our family of origin as far as like our lens, the way we perceive ourselves in the world, our shit, for lack of a better term. And so that's great. I always encourage the families to also get their own support and help, which a lot of times they don't. I do have a lot that do because it's easier for them to say, no, 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 they're the problem, not me. But that's not the case, as we know. But for them to have people in their lives that can say, dude, me too. I went through that too. There's something there's nothing like it. I mean, Bill W. had something when he created the big book. So
I say all the time, I'm a big, um, I believe in networking. I believe in connection, um, more than I do the 12 steps. But let me explain why. If you take two people and you put them side by side, person A says, I'll do the 12 steps, but I'm going to do them inside my bedroom. And I'm never
Yeah.
going to leave my bedroom. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to do the 12 steps. Hopefully, I'm going to have this spiritual experience that everybody talks about, but I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm not going to do anything. But I will do the 12 steps. And then person B says, I'm not going to do the 12 steps, but I will go to the meetings. I will go to dinner. I will go and get the coffees. I will, I'll hang out with these sober people. But I'm not going to do the 12 steps. I would 100% of the time say person B is going to have a better chance at sobriety, because I think that being around people is of utmost importance. Now, that is a situation or a scenario that will most likely, yeah, I'm sure there's people out there that um, have worked the 12 steps and they have relapsed because they don't go out and they don't meet with people and they don't do the stuff that really a 12-step program is designed to do. Um, so, you kind of get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, and you're 100% right. And obviously I've been treating people for 15 years and I can tell you both of those people relapse, right?
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
right. The ones that are connecting typically will have a longer period of sobriety versus the isolating one trying to do stuff. But the problem is this: the 12 steps were never meant to be worked in isolation. They were
Right.
always meant to be worked with a system of people. And so doing it by yourself actually isn't even doing it, right? It's not
Right.
actually doing the 12 steps. So you're not even like, you're not doing it. So, and same thing, like going to meetings and networking was never the intent just but in and of itself. It was for you to find other people who were working the steps that could help guide you through that process. To me, and again, I don't like whatever works for you works for you. It's not my life to live. But this is, to me, the 12 steps is like the easiest fucking thing in the world, because basically you're just like going like, my life kind of sucks and I need to acknowledge that there's a big part of that's my fault, and I want to fix that, and then I want to not make those same mistakes over and over and get rid of the chip on my shoulder. And in doing that, I now have a purpose in life, and I want to help other people find their purpose. That's it. That's the whole 12 steps in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
But to me, it's like a recipe, right?
Mhm.
So I can go out and I can just buy eggs and flour and sugar and hope for the best, mixing them together and sticking them in the oven and see what turns out. Or I can buy those ingredients and then follow a recipe step by step, and then I'm probably going to produce at least a decent, or at least something that resembles a cake, right? But really, the best thing for me to do would be to have somebody from the Food Network, like a Bobby Flay, come to my house and walk me through the recipe and show me how to sift flour and show me how to separate eggs and like go through the process of how to actually use those ingredients properly in that recipe. And then I'm going to have a fucking kick-ass cake, right? So to
Hmm.
me, that's what the process is. Like the honesty, the open-mindedness, the willingness, that stuff, that's the ingredients, right? And then the 12 steps is the actual recipe, and the people are the Food Network chefs, right? That help kind of guide us through the process. So like they were all meant to be used together, not independently. So yeah, somebody isolating, say, I'm going to read this book and do the 12 steps myself. Well, that you're doomed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the people going to the people, to your point, I agree, Tom, that the people that go to the meetings and make the coffee and they show up, they have a much better chance of actually eventually trying to work the steps because they see it so often, and they might feel attracted to that, and they might say, hey, I want that guy is always so chill and awesome and his life's great and I want that, and like, what did you do? And he says, oh, I worked the steps. So there's a chance that at least the attraction is going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the person isolating is never going to have that.
100%. I love that metaphor. I'm gonna take that and use that in my gonna file that away. So my husband's in recovery, and his drug of choices were heroin and crack, and he's coming up on 4 years of sobriety. And I remember, and his sponsor, God, I love him so much. He's almost like part of the family at this point. And he was at our wedding. I mean, John has just been a godsend. But when my husband shares his story, he talks about that. He's like, my way didn't fucking work. He ended up homeless. He ended up in a place that he never thought he would, as we hear the story quite often. And when he what got with John, it was like, I don't have to think. I just have to do what he's telling me to do. He said once he did that, it was just so much easier. And it just worked. It takes the thinking out of it, really. And the 12 steps, I live by this, that I think most everybody should do them. I've done them with Al-Anon. That
Agreed.
Al-Anon saved my life when it comes to that. Now I'm in ACA, and I'm starting my steps with that to go deeper. And I think anybody would benefit. It's how to live a life that's just whole and in principles and owning your part. I mean, those are things that we could all benefit from. Um, and
Okay.
sometimes I just wish the families would sometimes do that as well. Like, they would benefit so much, and then their relationships with their loved ones would just increase as a result.
The family, though, is so most family members wind up right with the codependency in that in such, because I hate the term codependency, honestly, but in such that they focus on their family member the way the family member focuses on drugs. So the family
Absolutely.
member is their drug of choice.
Right.
So in the same way that that drug addicted person wasn't going to see their problem until they were ready to see their problem, the family member isn't going to see their problem until they're ready to see their problem either. So yeah, it's
100%.
frustrating, but that's all that's happening. It's the same addiction, just on a different level.
Right. 100%. And that's something I think when with some of the clients here, when they get frustrated with their family members, I always remind them they're on their own healing, that they can't force you to get clean and sober until you are ready to get clean and sober. And that's why I hate the term normies, because I think everybody's a little fucked up, but in their own way. But normies, um, I think it takes a lot more for them, and they can live at a certain level and frequency and stay there until something bad enough happens. And that's why addicts and recovery are the most amazing people to me, because they're forced to do this work because something's so loud and destructive, but they have a sense of life that most people don't get to. And so it's a very, like, I love what I do. Sometimes it's very frustrating and very tragic, but the people that I see that, like, really get to see grow, I mean, that's why I show up every day, is for that reason.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Labor, this was fun. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. Um, Tell us something interesting about you that we don't know.
Which what? I don't know. Um,
What are
Put her
your
on the
hobbies?
spot, Tom.
What do you enjoy?
you know what? This question keeps coming up for me lately. Like, people keep asking me that, like, what do you do for fun, or what do you enjoy to do? And I'm like, man, that is a
Interesting.
really hard question. Well, because the thing is, I don't have a whole lot of time. Like, so I work out. I like weightlifting. I do actually enjoy that. Um, I have a 7-year-old, and she's very busy in things. So a lot, like when I'm not at work, a lot of my life is taking her to her things. So like on, say, Sundays when I have nothing planned and I don't have anything to do, like I sit on my couch and drink coffee and watch like old Matlock reruns. Like I just,
Wow.
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
like my dream Sunday. And like then can we do something? Can we? And no, I'm not doing anything. That's what I'm enjoying right now, doing nothing.
This is what
So
I'm doing.
Matlock.
yeah,
Matlock.
old Matlock, yeah.
Yeah.
Andy
Okay.
Griffith, Matlock.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Columbo, Murder, She Wrote. I love all of those.
That's cool.
I just started watching You on Netflix.
Oh,
I read that book.
Did you?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's rather interesting. I just discovered it. I'm on season 1 and it's pretty intense.
Ooh,
And I
just
guess there's
wait.
5 seasons of this show. So I'm pretty excited about that, but the bad thing is that, I find myself buried in Netflix for 2, 3 hours a night after my kids go to bed and I'm like, "Man, this could be a lot more productive, but screw it." You know?
Yeah.
Um Okay, well, so the book, and again, I'm gonna link it. It's a Addictaholic Deconstructed. I love that name. When did you come out with that book?
I published it in 2019.
Okay.
But it still sells. I mean, I still sell a few copies every day. So, and it is kind of in treatment centers, people buy it a lot of times and give it out to families. And, it's on Audible too, and it's on Kindle. I mean, it's all the ways you can get a book. So, the
Okay.
library you probably even get it at the library. I'd be willing to bet if you asked them, they would order it. You can get it at the library, so you don't even have to pay for it. Um,
Well, I'm gonna link
it's
it and go ahead.
Yeah, it's just to get the information out. I just want people to be able to have the information so that I don't have to repeat myself 857,000 times.
Yeah. Well, if people like Nicole are in this world and keep coming across your video and they have podcasts, well, you're probably gonna have to keep repeating yourself. 'Cause not I'm not a reader, so again, I'm as transparent as they come. I'm not gonna read the book, but I will
Sure.
eventually watch the video. But you're
Watch
obvious.
it in pieces.
Huh?
Watch it in chunks.
Okay.
Do like 10 minutes at a time. Just say, I'm gonna watch 10 minutes of this and just
How long
that's
is it?
It's an
it's an
hour.
hour.
Oh, good lord.
Oh,
Alright.
Tom, you can do it. I'm gonna annoy you until you watch it.
Well, that doesn't work, we know that.
That's fair.
Alright, Doctor Labor, I appreciate it. Nicole, I know, was excited about this, as was I, and I'm glad we got to do this. Do me a favor, don't hang up, I'm just gonna take us out, okay?
Sure.
Alright, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we wanna help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.